Get ready to take a journey back in time to the era of cowboys and gunslingers where lawlessness ruled the land. But what about the Wild West's relationship with sexuality? As we uncover the hidden tales of the frontier, be prepared for some shocking revelations and unexpected twists that will leave you questioning what you thought you knew about sexuality in the Wild West. So saddle up and hold on tight as we explore the wild and daring world of sexuality in the Wild West. How was sexuality in the Wild West? The Old West is shown in pop culture in a certain way. Even though we imagine cowboys with rifles at the ready as they roam the American frontier, we rarely ponder the topic of sex in the Old West. As it turns out, there's a solid explanation for that. Information about sexual behavior in the Wild West is far rarer than most people think. People still didn't talk freely about their sexual preferences even during times when prostitution was common in most urban centers. This can be attributed, at least in part, to the puritanical beliefs of the early Americans. Naked tangoing in the Old West was a forbidden subject, but there are some interesting anecdotes about the practice that survive. Interesting facts about sex in the Wild West are highlighted in our video, from men's penchant for dressing like ladies to the widespread belief that oral sex was too French for most. For all you Francophiles out there, please raise your hands. See which of these titillating facts about the American West sex scene most piques your interest and check it off your list. Gender roles were fluid and homosexuality was of little significance. It's common to associate the Old West with pictures of rough-hewn men who exemplify traditional masculine ideals. A gallant cowboy on horseback charging towards a damsel in distress who has been bound to the train rails. A life of dip-spitting, gun-loading, heavy drinking, and whore wailing. If that's how you imagine the Old West, you might be surprised to learn that some cowboys had harsh opinions toward gay people. People in the Wild West weren't automatically classified as homosexual or straight. Instead, they were given the freedom to express their true selves in any given situation. Professor Peter Borg, a chairman of the history department at the University of Colorado at Boulder and author of Same-Sex Affairs, claimed in a recent interview that those engaging in same-sex activities weren't viewed as homosexual. Some men would sexually and domestically assume the role of women when women were absent from huge settlements, such as mining camps full of men. In the Old West, men essentially made do with what they could find. As American as apple pie was prostitution. Prostitution was an integral part of every Western town or city, that much is certain. Across the Western Hemisphere, prostitution has been surprisingly widespread. Some locations were exactly as one might expect them to be: filthy, low-cost, and populated by ladies carrying sheets in order to lie on the ground for down and dirty time. In some places, prostitution was held in higher favor, and lavish brothels were administered by eloquent madams. The Old West's distinct social strata was reflected in the profession of prostitution. Many prostitutes were as young as 30 and had no formal education or training. Some were new arrivals, and their prices reflected not just their appearance but also their country of origin and cultural background. Prostitutes, like the faceless, easily replaced miners and railroad employees of the American frontier, served a necessary social and economic function for capitalism, but were otherwise largely forgotten as individuals. The method of birth control involved the ingestion of toxin. Many individuals may have pondered why there weren't more babies being born during this period of loose morals. Despite the availability of condoms, many people still resorted to using pharmaceutical methods to prevent unwanted pregnancies due to their high cost. These remedies contained poisonous components, usually derived from plants, that would immediately terminate an unplanned pregnancy. Pregnancy was a huge risk for women in this field because not only did it end their employment, but it also put their lives in danger. Many women on the frontier lost their lives while giving birth. Women often had to choose between having a child and dying or using dangerous chemicals to terminate a pregnancy they did not want. Oral sex was too civilized for cowboys. Oral sex, something that everyone likes, right? Actually, turns out that's a no. Chad Heap, Associate Professor of American Studies and undergraduate advisor of the Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies program at George Washington University, and a frequent contributor to the Reddit section Ask Historians, explains in his book, Slumming: Sexual and Racial Encounters in American Nightlife, 1885 to 1940, that fellatio was thought to be a little too foreign for Americans during the time period. It was a little too French, if you will. And as evidence suggests that even prostitutes opposed it and avoided other working women who didn't mind providing dome. Cross-dressing occurred in both directions. Peter Boag, a historian who specialized in the Old West, was astounded to learn how widespread cross-dressing was. It's understandable why women might feel the need to dress masculinely in order to succeed, but Boag discovered many examples of males clothing femininely, which seems to go against the grain of the popular perception of cowboys as strutting John Wayne impersonators. Boag said, "What I was unprepared for when I started unearthing all of these female-to-male cross-dressers, I also started to uncover hundreds of stories of males who dressed as women." Privacy during the act? Think again. Families frequently resided in modest homes in the Wild West, which typically only had one spacious room. Privacy was therefore no longer an issue when a family was forced to share one area. In such instances, it is reasonable to wonder how you would have sex if you shared a bed with your kids or other family members. Individuals like Martin Luther established a sanctity of privacy surrounding the act of sex, which was previously non-existent. In the United States, the class provided access to sexual privacy as well as general privacy. Most people in the Wild West didn't have money, which meant they had no privacy. What transpired in those one-room homes after that? You helped them exit by doing what was required. There wasn't much education on the topic. People were not given the correct information regarding intimacy, which meant they were just not uninformed about their own bodies, but also uninformed about STDs. In the late 1800s, packets referred to as marriage manuals were offered and contained some information. These packets, however, emphasized the significance of only doing the act within marriage, in addition to being erroneous. They also emphasized how unhealthy self-indulgence was because the Lord forbade using a man's seed for anything other than reproduction. Beyond that, you'd have to learn by doing if you want to know anything. Sexual assault was rampant. Women didn't have many options in life or in the workplace, which was a very sad but true truth of the Old West. Most went on to become nurses, teachers, or prostitutes. Women were categorically viewed as inferior to men in terms of social standing, which led to an environment where rape and sexual assault were commonplace. For those who had been assaulted or raped, there were few, if any, legal options available. Most women chose to remain silent because they knew that authorities would not be looking for their abusers. In spite of the fact that rape culture is now more frequently acknowledged than it was in the Wild West, this disturbing piece argues that the culture of silence that affected raped and abused women in the 19th century is still very much in existence. The slang was very dissimilar to the language of today. Taking a trip to Pound Town, fooling around, knocking boots, banging fuzzies, etc. These are all terms used in contemporary slang to refer to the birds and the bees. When it comes to getting down and dirty, the language used in the Old West was very different. Here's a list of expressions used in Wild West lingo. One of the strangest is pyrooting, which denotes sexual activity. Give it a shot sometime. Hey babe, how about some pyrooting this evening? Gahal, that was a boisterous lady. Get the wrong pig by the tail means choose the wrong person for a reason. When she wanted to peg me, I realized I got the wrong pig by the tail. And rat trap, the frame on a woman's dress or skirts, or some other terms on that list. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's video, but don't worry, you can always expect more interesting content from us in future videos. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.